You embarrassed this unit. The colonel tried to hit her until she snapped his arm in front of 192 soldiers. Lieutenant Reed. The shout sliced through the humid morning air like a blade. 200 soldiers stood at attention in perfect rows, their boots locked on the parade ground. At the center, Lieutenant Reed's jaw tightened as Colonel Briggs advanced on her, his uniform immaculate, his face twisted with fury. You embarrassed this unit, he spat. Stepping so close she could feel his breath, his hand twitched as though he might strike her. Around them, the silent ranks of soldiers stiffened. Reed's heart pounded. But her eyes didn't flinch. Something inside her whispered, "This ends today. Hours from now." 192 soldiers would remember this moment, not the colonel's rage, but the sound of bones snapping in front of the entire battalion. But how had it come to this, and why would Reed risk everything she'd worked for to fight back? Lieutenant Reed had spent years clawing her way through the ranks. She was the first in her family to serve, the first woman in her battalion to lead a full company, but success had come at a cost. Colonel Briggs had made her life a daily trial. He belittled her in front of the men, questioned her competence, and hinted at disciplinary action for the smallest mistake. Reed wanted nothing more than to prove herself, to lead with honor, and to show the younger cadets that strength wasn't about intimidation. But Briggs didn't see her as a leader. He saw her as a threat. That morning, Reed had corrected Briggs during a tactical briefing. It was a simple, factual statement about troop positioning, but the colonel's face had darkened. He dismissed the meeting, summoning her to the parade ground immediately. Now, with the soldiers assembled, he circled her like a predator. "You think you know more than me," he hissed. "You're an embarrassment to this uniform." Red felt the sting of humiliation. But before she could speak, Briggs raised his hand, ready to strike. The battalion watched, frozen. Reed's training screamed at her to stand still, to absorb whatever came next. But another voice, quieter and stronger, reminded her that respect was not earned through silence. She took a half step back. Eyes locked on Briggs. "With all due respect, sir," she said steadily, "you don't get to put your hands on me." Briggs's face twisted. "You dare." He lunged, his hand swinging down. Time slowed. Reed's body moved on instinct. She caught Briggs's wrist mid-swing and twisted, redirecting his momentum. The colonel stumbled, shocked. Reed's voice was low, but unshaken. "Stand down, sir." But Briggs didn't. He yanked forward, trying to break her grip. That was the moment Reed decided she wasn't going to be the victim anymore. For a brief second, Reed feared she'd gone too far. One wrong move could end her career. But as Briggs raised his other hand, the decision was made for her. With a sharp, practiced motion, Reed stepped forward, locking her shoulder into the twist. A crack echoed across the parade ground as Briggs's arm gave way. The colonel dropped to his knees, clutching his broken arm, his face pale with shock. 192 soldiers stood in absolute silence. Military police escorted Briggs from the field minutes later. No one spoke, but Reed could feel their eyes on her, some fearful, others filled with quiet respect. She exhaled slowly, shoulders squared. She had no idea what consequences awaited her, but one thing was certain. The days of silent endurance were over. Lieutenant Reed turned to her company, her voice clear and strong full out, and for the first time, 192 soldiers moved as one, not for the colonel, but for her. But now the question is, what will happen to Lieutenant Reed after snapping the colonel's arm in front of 192 soldiers? Will she be court-martialed, or will the truth finally come to light? Comment below what you think the consequences will be. And if this gets enough support, we'll make part 2 to reveal what happens next.